My name is Jack Collier and welcome to Bearwood. My documentary is going to be called The Life and Soul of Bearwood, and we start my journey on here, Lightwoods Park. And now Eileen Collier is going to talk about how the park has changed from 60 years ago.
This is Shakespeare's garden, so called because all the plants within it are mentioned in Shakespeare's plays. Sadly, it's now locked most of the time because of vandalism. This area was once a beautiful bowling green, but now is just a general playing area, very close to the main road. This is Lightwood House, once a family house. Then it was a small cafe in the left-hand corner. Then it became the Hardman Studios, where they made beautiful stained glass windows, and hopefully now will be renovated when it becomes owned by Sandwell Council. It was very popular years ago. We had brass band concerts and choirs and all sorts of things, but sadly that again is no longer happening. Maybe soon. The area of the skateboarding park used to be a lovely pool, and then it was filled in and was just left to get messy. And then we had a visit from Annika Rice, and she came and with her team and made the play area, and then the council provided the skateboarding ramp, which is obviously very popular. Tennis many moons ago. It was netted all the way around with a gate, and you used to pay at the little kiosk up by the bowling green and then come down and have an hour's tennis. But again, sadly, no more.
Thank you to Eileen Collier there. That was just about how Lightwoods Park has changed over the past 60 years. After reading through lots of sources, I have located a man called David Yates. He invented the Smethwick History Society and has lived in Bearwood for most of his life.
Nice to meet you.
Well, hi David, thank you for agreeing to let me interview you about Bearwood.
That's okay.
Let's start at the top of Bearwood, where our bus station is today, and opening to Lightwoods Park. What can you tell us about this part of Bearwood?
That used to be the toll gate, just about on the corner there. The road then was known as the Turnpike from Halesowen into Birmingham, and so carts, wagons stopped there, paid the price and passed on to Birmingham. There was another one a little bit further down, and another one at 5 ways before entering the what is now the city, but what was then the town. It was also, the bus station itself was actually built on part of what was the Lightwoods Park, which used to be part of the Lightwoods estate and belonging to the Lightwoods house that stood in the park. So that was taken after it became a park by the local council and turned into a bus station. At a later date, when the present bus station was being built, air raid shelters were found underneath. No one knew they were there until the digging began, and it caused a great many problems at the time. To suddenly find a large hole in the ground made with reinforced concrete when you expected just to lay your tarmac.
Do you know anything about the old bandstand and the old derelict house at Lightwoods Park?
Yes, it was built in the 1700s. I quite forget who built it now. Jonathan Grundy. It passed through various members of his family until it became the home of the Adkins family. They were soap makers. They had a very big soap factory down in Smethwick. They also, or at least George Caleb Atkins, head of the family, gave the money for building St Mary's Church. When he died, he left an instruction in his will that his family were to sell all his property, his real estate, and turn it into cash. They began actually to develop the area. They bought land to add to the original Lightwoods estate which was just what we now call Lightwoods Park. And they sold it to a consortium of builders, and building began from the Bear Hotel right the way up to the top of Bearwood Road, down through Shires Oak as far as Wigorn Road, the length of Wigorn Road, and up to Atkins Lane. All those houses were built on the Lightwoods estate. But when it came to Lightwoods Park, there was an outcry, and over in Edgbaston and Harborne, a protest group was formed called the Selborne Society, after Gilbert White's famous book. Alexander Chance headed that committee that was set up, and he was brought in as a big gun, and he was brought in by the Bearwood Early Morning School, who said, you know, we need to save this park. So he took over immediately, being a local philanthropist and very, very rich. He also knew the Edgbaston elite, the Kenricks, the Chamberlains, the Beals, the whole staff almost of Birmingham University, the elite of the area, and he got them on side, and they put their hands in their pockets and they contributed largely to buying the land to save the park, which became Lightwoods Park, which he did in 1902. Now the bandstand was given by a man by the name of Mason. I think it was cast up in Scotland, but I wouldn't be too sure of that. But that was put in as part of the general park package, which went along with swans given by the king. Someone gave a clock for the front of the house, which you can still see, although it doesn't work. Other people gave aviaries and seats and so on. And so it was a general time of giving, and it became a public park, and that's Lightwoods Park. It cost somewhere in the region of £11,000. There were lots of small donations, but we shouldn't kid ourselves that it was a park given by the people. It was given by the elite, who dug deep and gave a great deal of money.
Were there any trams in Bearwood?
Yes, there were. I think, without looking at reference, I believe it was around about 1905 that they were brought up from the Cape Hill end. They went as far as the King's Head, they turned round and went back again. So those were the trams in Bearwood. Before that, you had horse buses. They too came as far as the King's Head, turned around and went back the other way to Birmingham. But it took an awful long time for them to come up there. They didn't go beyond the King's Head because that was still not on their remit, and they'd be crossing the border. There were other forms of transport going up and down there. It was only later that buses actually went up from the King's Head onto Halesowen. But in the early 1900s, or around about 1900s, they stopped at King's Head.
I've been walking down a lot Bearwood recently, and I've come across a bear tavern with the bear's head on the top. Can you tell me more about the tavern's history?
There's been a pub on the site since about 1718. So obviously before that, it was recorded in 1718, apparently on a map. So there's been one there for considerable time. It was sometimes known as a sign of the bear, which was simply that there was a sign outside of a bear. It's not probably our oldest tavern. Our Smethwick's oldest tavern. That goes to that would go to the old chapel, I would imagine.
Oh yeah.
It's older than the bear, but it's gone through a considerable amount of facelift since then. Without again reverting to reference, I can't remember exactly when, but by the early 1900s, you've got the present Bear Tavern. Prior to that, it was set back a little from the road. It made a very dangerous corner when Bearwood Road was actually cut and resurfaced. So it was sort of, the alignment was changed a little bit. So what you see today is an alteration, and the present frontage is a travesty of what was rather a beautiful building, but you know, they can't afford to do it at the moment. But that's about it really. It was a centre for the area. There were performers performed there. Len Newbury was one back in the 20s. And during the war years, a lot of people came over the borders to Smethwick because the licensing laws were different, and you could actually sing a little bit in Smethwick, which you couldn't do on the other side. There's also the fact that the licensing hours, or the licensed hours, were different in Smethwick to Birmingham, so that closing time at the Bear would see a rush up to the King's Head over the border in Birmingham to get another drink. So it must have been a bit of a stampede. But it is a very old pub. And Hubert Galton, who built Whalley Abbey, or had Whalley Abbey built for himself, he wrote in one of his letters that he fell off his horse at the sign of the Bear. So it's stuck in his memory. Whether he was coming out of the Bear or considering going in at the time, we don't know. But he fell off his horse. Could have been the cause.
Yeah. Can you tell me anything about Bearwood Primary School? I heard it was bombed back in the day.
Yes, it was. Excuse me. Yes. November 1940. It suffered a direct hit during a raid on the night. The infants department was nearly demolished. Sorry, it's just I happen to have this, you know, it makes it easy. The infants department was nearly demolished, the Nick school was shaken and a lot of glass was broken. The nursery had a direct hit and was destroyed, and the extent of the damage was as follows: rooms 1, 2 and 3 destroyed, rooms 4 and 5 and staff room damaged, 2 cloakrooms destroyed, lavatory and wash bowls and wash tank gone, nursery WCs destroyed, stockroom destroyed, and instructions were then received for closure by the Education Office just for a while.
Wow.
So that's what happened in November 1940.
Wow. I heard that the Bearwood Snooker Hall used to be a skating rink, and before that they used to hold music theatres there. Can you tell us all about this?
Yes, it was built by Mr. Hewitson, Edward Hewitson. He was Smethwick's cinema king. He started off in the early days of cinema. Prior to that, he'd been a manager at the Theatre Royal, but he moved across and became a cinema mogul, owning 5 of the 8 of Smethwick's cinemas. It's hard to believe that Smethwick once had 8 cinemas in it. Part of his policy seemed to be to buy up the theatres, and he actually picked up the Theatre Royal on the way. I think he picked up 2 other theatres, and then he built the Snooker Hall, which was a theatre cinema. The object seems to be that there'd be no other form of entertainment in Smethwick other than cinemas, of which he owned 5, and that if there was a live show going to be put on, it'd be a Hewitson production. It doesn't say that in the newspapers at the time. That seems to be the way he was working. But yeah, so he built that. And for a long time, a lot of people that were quite famous at the time came to perform there. The early days of Coronation Street, one of its famous sons stayed in a caravan not fairly close by to the theatre, and theatricals stayed in houses round about. So it became quite a landmark on the theatre venue of the area. In the very early days, of course, you used before radio, to finish it off, you'd have the PRO shows popping in there during the wet period, and various performers, outdoor performers, would perform there. But in the main, yes, it was quite a well-known theatre. The skating rink came later. I don't know how long that was there. I imagine compared to the theatre it was relatively short-lived, and then of course latterly the Snooker Hall arrives. But it's still in use, and you can see that it's an integrated development. It has shops in front, it has the theatre behind, so you know, it's quite an upmarket development for the area at the time.
And finally, what are your thoughts on Bearwood today?
Strangely enough, Bearwood today is not much different to what Bearwood always was. We're told that it was better in the past. Everything was, as you get older, everything was better in the past. In fact, it never was, as my father used to say. or my great-grandfather thinking of it, not my father. Kids today aren't what they were, but then they never was. So Bearwood is doing what Bearwood does. It survives. It survives fluctuations in trade. It survives economic recesses. The shops go up and they go down. Sometimes Bearwood has a definitely upmarket feel, sometimes it's cheaper. And it's been doing that for years. That's the way it survives. That's the way shopping centres should survive. The very fact that you turn over to a great supermarket and your whole being as a community depends on that, rather mitigates against our times, because if that goes down, so does your community. And we have seen this happen in Bearwood. The main supermarket was a community centre. When that disappeared, we got Aldi. Aldi is okay, but Aldi is not a substitute for a decent supermarket. Aldi is saying, you buy what we've got when we want to sell it to you. A supermarket says, we've got what you want because we listen to you, and it becomes a meeting place. It also had a post office within the supermarket. That too was a meeting place. So Bearwood is suffering the way the rest of the nation is suffering by the incursions of large consortiums who we then have to depend on whether we like it or not. But Bearwood will survive, and it has survived. It hasn't changed much really since the day it was built. So if anyone tells you it has, they're lying.
Well, thank you for your help today, David. I know a lot more information on Bearwood, and I hope my audience do too.
Pleasure.
Not many people realise how many famous people have come from Bearwood and the surrounding area.
Dex's Midnight Runners. Julie Walters. The Twang. And Frank Skinner. And we have been visited by many famous people, especially the comedy nights at the Bear Tavern, where a host of comedians used to come, including Sean Hughes, Ed Byrne, and some of TV's The Fast Show. You will also be surprised to know that the Thimble Mill swimming baths, now known as Smethwick swimming baths, is apparently haunted, offering ghost walks in the building at the pump house and the cellars. But the swimming baths itself hosted one of the most famous bands in the world. These were the Beatles, and they played here on the 19th of November 1962.
Here we are, back where we started. We have had an insight into Bearwood from the good old days to how it is now. Thank you for joining me on my journey. Goodbye.